So today is Sunday the 27th of August. The forecast looks great, sun's out, bit of a breeze, tide's up, and we've got 4 blazes out this weekend, plus the Alto. The start was a bit of a mixed bag. I'd chosen to stay out in the tide to get the most of it. But in this southwesterly breeze, it puts you closer to St Mary's Island and therefore a big wind shadow, which does pose one of those dilemmas that we all have racing at Wilsonians. How close dare you get to St Mary's Island? You see, if the first mark is buoy 30 up in this corner, the right end of the line to be at is obviously the end nearest the mark, except that's the end that's in the wind shadow of St Mary's Island. So it's always one of those difficult decisions to make of how much extra distance is worth sailing to get in the better breeze. Now, while all that's going through my mind and I'm trying to decide where I want to be, it occurs to me that everyone else is down at the other end of the line and not really trying to make any effort to come up towards me. Which got me thinking, perhaps 30 isn't the first mark of this course. So I decided to drive over and follow the rest of them. And sure enough, after a quick conversation with John Gowdy, he points out to me that 30 is indeed on the course, but it's the second mark. The first mark is the Who Cardinal mark that's further to the east, out of the wind shadow, and a pretty straightforward buoy to reach in this wind direction. So all my worrying was for nothing. But as it turned out, the start hadn't hurt me at all, because as I said at the beginning, I was in more tide. And the net result is, we all went down this part of the river together. So here we are at the Who Cardinal mark. The Alto this time was clear ahead. Not that far ahead, given he's got a spinnaker, but far enough ahead that he didn't have to worry about the chasing pack. And the chasing pack, which was us 4 blazes, were all still really close together. I got around second, and I think Brian snuck round into third, with John and Martin right next to him. This would lead us onto a reach stroke fetch up to buoy 30. The buoy I originally thought was the first mark of the course, but of course I've since learned is the second. This is one of those legs there's normally quite good fun in a blaze, and kind of was this time, although there wasn't quite enough wind to really get ripping. Sometimes you'd be out of the wing and splashing around, and other times it'd all go a bit quiet. But the long and the short of it is, not much changed as far as the race is concerned. I think John and Martin got past Brian, but we were all still pretty close together. you'll see me fiddling with the control lines on this leg. I've had, I think, 5 or 6 blazes now over the years, and one of them I had twice. And in that time, I've long since learned what it is that I want the controls to do. And I have to say, this boat is just about as well rigged as I want it to be. On the outside of the line is the Cunningham. At my weight, I use the Cunningham quite a lot. You put it on hard, pulls the sail down, bends the mast, and lets the top of it twist off. I wouldn't call myself a lightweight anymore like I used to be, but I'm still a bit light for the boat, and it's certainly the best way to tame the boat down on a windy day. Next to that, the yellow line is the kicker. There's a lot of leech on a blade sail. If you drew a sail on a boat like a kid with a triangle, it's the extra bit that sticks out the side. And that really twists off or hooks depending if there's too much pressure or not enough. So consequently, unless you're going dead upwind when you can actually do a lot of that with just the main sheet, you use the kicker a lot. Next to that, without a cleat, is the blue rope that is for my centreboard. It's a continuous line on both sides. The line on the outside pulls the board up, and I have it rigged in such a way with a 2-to-1 floating block that you'll see on the deck, so that when I pull it hard, A, it comes up easily, B, when that block hits the eye that's on the deck, it can't go any further. And I have the lines set such that that is my kind of max up for reaching position. It means when I get to a top mark and I want to bear away, I can just pull that rope hard, the board will come up to where I want it for a reach and no further. I don't have that risk of pulling it too hard. Blaze sailors that have done this will know, but if you're hiking hard and pull the blade too far up, the centreboard will lose grip in the water and you'll just capsize to windward. It all happens very quickly. So on mine, like I say, the block stops it coming up any further, and the only time I do want the board up further is on a dead run. But on a dead run, I'm in the boat and I can just manually push the board up with my hands then. So then the other side of that blue rope is the downhaul. That goes to a 2-to-1 purchase as well at the back of the board, and that can pull it down from wherever. The whole system works really well. The outhaul, as you can see, I just have on the boom. For me, the outhaul is one of those controls in a blaze where I set it for where I think is correct for the conditions of the day, and then I never fiddle with it during a race. If we've got several races in a day, then while I'm bobbing around between races, I might fiddle with it a bit, but once the gun goes, I never touch it. Those control lines I've mentioned as well aren't continuous. I just have them up each side of the boat. It does mean I have to be conscious of how much rope I've got out on each side, so I don't have that problem we've all experienced of running out of rope on the side I want to adjust. As long as I keep on top of it, and there's more than enough travel for me to do that, it's not a problem. Anyway, back to the race. As you've seen, we've been round Buoy 30 and we're on the long run now down to South Yandick Creek. This week there was enough wind to make this perfectly pleasurable, but not so much that we were really screaming along. If a gust came and you worked the angles enough, you could just about pop it up on the plane, but you wouldn't be able to maintain it. What was more significant at times was the lines of wind that were coming down the river. I've jibed here because there's clearly more wind out of the tide where the rest of the boats are. And sometimes you might feel like you're in the right place, as in I'm in more tide, but if the rest of the fleet is on a different piece of water and has got better wind, well then that's where you should be, isn't it? So we're approaching South Yantlet 4 now, and there's a little bit more pressure. Not enough to be scary, but enough to get us moving along nicely. As we went across the tide, we all took slightly different lines here. I tried to sail more angles. Brian sailed a better angle downriver, but then had to sail deep just to get up to the mark. And both John and Martin kind of sailed shortest distance. But when we got here, not a lot had changed, to be honest. I was still just about in front, Martin was now second, John right behind him, and Brian just a couple of boat lengths behind John. So just as we went round the mark, Martin decided he'd had enough of following me and tacked immediately. It was an awkward little leg this. We had to get out of Stangate Creek, which meant pushing the tide. Martin obviously decided there wouldn't be much benefit in going to one side or the other, and he'd rather be in clear air. I think if I'd been in his shoes, I'd have done the same thing. But as you'll come to realise, there was definitely a benefit in getting over to this northern shore. Although I don't think there's much difference in depth all the way across here, as you get closer to the fault, I think there's a bit of an eddy or something like that that sets up. But in that way, that hindsight's a wonderful thing, the racing goes to show that all the boats that went right up this beat had a big advantage over Martin, who went into the middle. So now we reach a point in this race where a decision's got to be made. You see, we've got to cross the main river channel to get to the Who Green One buoy. As you can see, I'm just sailing along, trying not to make any mistakes, wondering what the fleet's going to do. John has decided to foot off and head to the other side. He can't stay in my dirty air, he's made a decision, he's going hard left. Martin, meantime, who obviously lost ground because he went the wrong way up that last beat, has decided to tack early, stay in the main channel and go hard right. So let me throw something on the screen and let's talk about what's happening, and you can decide what you would have done. So this is the problem. We're about where the red dot is. We're trying to get to where the green dot is. It's basically a beat. The wind is still coming from the southwest, as the blue arrow suggests. The tide in the main channel, which is strong, is going out, heading towards what is the northeast on my map. But there is a tide coming out of the channel, which the Who Green One buoy is marking, which is going west. So if you go down the main channel, like Martin is, you'll get the benefit of the tide in the main channel, but you'll have to push all the tide that's coming out of the Who Creek. If you do what John's doing, and go all the way across, you really don't benefit from the tide in the channel at all, but then you don't have a problem with any tide coming out of the creek. It's a dilemma, isn't it? What would you do? So as you can see, I did what everyone does who doesn't really know the answer and just decided to go down the middle. As it would turn out, that would mean I'd only made half a mistake. Because really, what I've just asked you was a trick question. Because what really happened is the wind shifted 20 degrees to the west, and only the boats on the west got what was probably a 5 or 6 knot increase in wind speed. So John, who'd gone that way, tacked when the pressure got to him, and then had to bear off and reach down to hoogering one buoy. Martin, who'd gone hard the other way, had to tack on a header in not much pressure to fight his way against that tide that was coming out the hoogering creek. Really, I suspect he was just being punished further for that mistake he'd made in Yanknet Creek. If he'd not been so far behind, he wouldn't have been pressured into doing something different and going hard in one direction, and might have ended up just losing out a little bit as I did. But as it turned out, both he and Brian got caught on the wrong side of it. I was now a comfortable second, but John was so far ahead he doesn't even appear in the pictures. So who's had this problem before? Coming up to what effectively is a windward mark, I want to get ready for the bear away and release the kicker. And can I get it out of the cleat? And then of course a puff comes and I run out of hands, so I have to stop fiddling with the kicker for a bit to release the main, and then the kicker jumps out on its own. It's not a problem I normally have anymore, because we have these risers under our cleats now that just hold them up at an angle so that they're easier to operate. But if nothing else, it does go to show how important the kicker is in holding the power in the rig. Because as soon as the kicker went, if I wasn't quick, I'd have gone into windward. So anyway, that was the beat done. We're now on to a run down to 22. John's nowhere to be seen, and you can just about make out Martin and Brian behind us, probably another 30 seconds away from the mark. By the time we got to 22, I was just starting to come into John a bit. Not close enough to really worry him, but close enough that he'd have to keep an eye on me. Once we'd gone round 22, it was a very one-sided beat across to MYA1. And then it would be a bit of reaching and fetching up and down the river between MYA1 and 25. From a racing point of view, this would be the dullest point of the race, but any blaze sailor will tell you that it's the reaching and fetching that's the really good fun bit. And from a sailing point of view, this really was fantastic fun. Now jibing a blaze is just like jibing any other boat. It has got a pretty big main and you've got to keep the racks out of the water. Now I'm not exactly proud of my jibe. I ended up letting go of the main sheet. Fortunately I have a knot. I have a knot for various reasons to be honest, but one of them is because if things get desperate and I let go of the main sheet, hopefully the knot stops the boom folding around the shroud and bringing the mast down. Anyway, however messy my jibe was, it went a bit worse for John. It didn't actually take him that long to get the boat up from the capsize, but he was punished even further by the fact that Martin had really come into us both on this reaching leg and had closed the gap a lot. So the first thing he heard, once he'd got back on the boat and started moving again, was Martin come screaming past. So not much more happened in this race. The wind got quite light on the beat back up along Gillingham Reach. The beat was made slightly more challenging by the snow fleet, not their fault, but we're all trying to stay out of the tide in what was a falling wind. But it was a pleasant sail nonetheless. I should just say, sorry Sophie, I did look, but I couldn't see you waving at the camera as I went past. But to be honest, there is an awful lot of footage to look at, so forgive me if I missed it. Anyway, the race finished with me first, Martin second, John hanging on to third and Brian fourth. We were all surprisingly spread out at the end. That doesn't really tell you how close the race was. I hope the footage goes some way to showing you just how much fun sailing on the Medway can be, especially on a day like this.